Hello, my name is Nishat Noor and welcome to Millennium Headlines. This week's top headlines are: Congress okays bill banning Guantanamo detainees from U.S. At least 2 dead in Ohio after business jet hits building. Missouri protesters welcome media day after shunning it. Clinton pushes back against GOP on veterans' health issues. UK's Cameron. EU demands not Mission Impossible. President Obama's weekly address. Now the details to this week's top headlines. Congress sent President Barack Obama a $607 billion defense policy bill that he is expected to sign, even though he adamantly opposes its ban on moving some Guantanamo Bay detainees to U.S. prisons. The Senate overwhelmingly approved the bill 91-3 on Tuesday, just days after the House passed the bipartisan measure 370-58. The legislation authorizes Pentagon spending on military personnel, ships, aircraft, and other war-fighting equipment. The President plans to send Congress a blueprint for fulfilling his campaign pledge to close the U.S. prison in Cuba, but the plan is widely expected to be dead on arrival on Capitol Hill, with Republicans and some Democrats opposed to any move to detain some of the terror subjects on U.S. soil. The congressional decision to retain a ban on transferring detainees to the U.S. has prompted debate on whether the president will try to bypass Congress and close the prison through executive action. We know he's contemplating it, said Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, a Republican. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said Obama would sign the bill because it includes provisions critical to protecting the United States. But he said the president's signature does not change his position about the need to close the prison. To do so, however, Obama would have to ignore the will of Congress, Senator Kelly Ayotte, a Republican, said. If Obama issued an executive order on Guantanamo, it clearly would violate the law. This is now something the American people want to see happen with Guantanamo, and so the president needs to follow the law, and the law is very clear on this, she said. The bill imposes restrictions on transferring any of the 112 remaining detainees to the United States or a foreign country. Loudest in congressional opposition have been the Republican senators from Colorado, Kansas, and South Carolina, 3 states which have facilities reviewed by a Pentagon assessment team. Pentagon Press Secretary Peter Cook said, "Let's wait to see what the plan finally looks like. The folks who are crafting that plan have been working very hard on this for months. This is not going to deter the department from moving forward." The Senate also passed legislation by 93-0 that provides money to the Defense Department for military construction, military family housing, base closures, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. Like the defense bill, the measure prohibits the administration from renovating, expanding, or constructing facilities in the United States to house detainees from Guantanamo Bay. The facilities reviewed by Pentagon assessment team were the United States Disciplinary Barracks and Midwest Joint Regional Corrections Facility at Leavenworth, Kansas. The Consolidated Naval Brig, Charleston, South Carolina, the Federal Correctional Complex, which includes the medium, maximum, and supermax facilities in Florence, Colorado, and the Colorado State Penitentiary 2 in Cannon City. Colorado, Obama vetoed an earlier version of the defense policy bill over a dispute later resolved about whether defense spending increases should be accompanied by boosts in domestic programs. Among other things, the revised bill authorizes $300 million for Ukraine forces fighting Russian-backed rebels, including $50 million for lethal assistance and counter-artillery raiders. Extends a ban on torture to the CIA. Authorizes the President's request of $750 million to help Iraqi forces fight Islamic State militants. Identifies $11 billion in unnecessary spending and reinvests in fighter aircraft, shipbuilding, and strengthening cyber defense. Authorizes $3.8 billion for the Afghan National Security Forces. At least 2 dead in Ohio after business jet hits building. The pilot and co-pilot of a business jet died after their plane, possibly with passengers on board, hit 2 residential buildings while approaching an Akron, Ohio airport on Tuesday afternoon, local media and authorities said. Ohio State Highway Patrol confirmed the death of the pilot and co-pilot, and police were investigating if there were more fatalities. Ohio State Highway Patrol confirmed the deaths of the pilot and co-pilot, and police were investigating if there were more fatalities, according to Ohio State Highway Patrol spokesman Lieutenant Bill Haymarker. The Akron Beacon Journal reported that the owner of the plane had said there were 7 passengers on board. This could not immediately be confirmed. The 10-passenger plane struck a residential building at about 3 p.m., engulfing in the flames, said Haymaker. Then the plane hit an embankment and another residential building, Haymaker added. A utility wire was also hit. No names were provided. No one was at home in either building at the time for the crash, and there were no other injuries reported on the ground, Haymaker said. The accident involved a Hawker H-25 business jet, and the National Transportation Safety Board will be in charge of the investigation, according to FAA spokesman Tony Molinaro. The jet had been approaching the Akron-Fulton Airport, Molinaro said. Akron-based utility First Energy Corp said the crash caused a power outage for 1,500 customers around the airport. It appears that the plane clipped a couple of lines, said Mark Durbin, a First Energy spokesman. Missouri protesters welcome media day after shunning it. Protesters credited with helping oust the University of Missouri System's president and the head of its flagship campus welcomed reporters to cover their demonstration Tuesday, a day after a videotaped clash between some protesters and a student photographer drew media condemnation as an affront to the free press. Activists removed yard signs warning the media to stay away from a grassy area of campus that has served an impromptu campsite for the protesters in recent days. Concerned Student 1950, a group which led the protest, put out flyers titled Teachable Moments to encourage demonstrators to cooperate with the media. The media is important to tell our story and experiences at Mizzou to the world, the flyer read. Let's welcome and thank them. The embrace stood in sharp contrast to Monday when protesters chanted, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, reporters have got to go," and some tried to block a freelance student photographer from covering protesters' celebratory reaction to the system president's departure over what they saw as indifference to racial tensions at the school. Clinton pushes back against GOP on veterans' health issues. Hillary Rodham Clinton outlined steps to improve the Department of Veterans Affairs on Tuesday, casting herself as a protector against proposals to privatize the sprawling healthcare system for those who have served in military. In a pre-Veterans Day event, the Democratic presidential candidate said she would seek to improve veterans' health care, modernize veterans' benefit systems, and address an unwieldy bureaucracy that was exposed in a scandal involving chronic delays for those seeking medical care or to have their claims processed. These problems are serious, systemic, and unacceptable. They need to be fixed, Clinton said at a Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall. She added, privatization is a betrayal, plain and simple, and I'm not going to let it happen. Clinton's town hall meeting included questions about how she might tackle the threat posed by Islamic State militants if she became commander-in-chief. Clinton said in response to a question that she does not currently support a declaration of war against the Islamic State, given the diffuse nature of the group and the potential cost. If you have a declaration of war, you better have a budget that backs it up, she said. At another point, a man who once worked at Hewlett-Packard told Clinton that when he sees Republican candidate Carly Fiorina, a former HP chief executive, on television, he wants to reach in and strangle her. Clinton laughed along with the audience as the man said, "I know that doesn't sound very nice." Clinton told him, "I wouldn't mess with you." Republican National Committee spokesman Allison Moore said the joke was in poor taste and that Clinton and Democrats had lost all credibility claiming to a party that stands up for women. Clinton's plan for veterans would seek fundamental changes to veterans' health care to ensure access to high-quality health care in a timely fashion and addresses the backing to claims. She said within the first 30 days of taking office, she would convince the Defense Secretary and VA Secretary for regular meetings, and there would be zero tolerance for abuses and delays within the system. Clinton's campaign has pointed to plans circulated by the conservative Concerned Veterans for America that would reconstruct the Veterans Health Administration into a government-chartered non-profit corporation to help it compete with the private sector. Republicans say that she has overstated efforts to privatize veterans' health care. Responding to her proposals, GOP officials said Clinton was offering hypocrisy, noting that her plan would allow the government to contract with the private sector for certain services such as a special inpatient or surgical procedures and access to mental health and substance abuse treatment when the VA couldn't provide timely access to care. For her to accuse me and my Republican colleagues of wanting to privatize the VAs is, of course, inaccurate and offensive, Arizona Senator John McCain said in a statement. He pointed to a veterans bill signed into law last year by President Barack Obama that included an expansion of private care options. Clinton was forced to backtrack last month after she said in an interview with MSNBC that the veterans' health care scandal was not widespread as suggested and accused Republicans of politicizing the agency. Republicans, led by McCain, responded that Clinton lacked an appreciation for the crisis facing veterans' health care and urged her to apologize. Phoenix was the epicenter of the wait time scandal that led the resignation of former VA Secretary Eric Shinzeki and the new law overhauling the agency and authorizing billions in new spending. UK's Cameron. EU demands not Mission Impossible. Prime Minister David Cameron on Tuesday called on the European Union to agree to irreversible changes to the country's relationship with the 28-nation political bloc as he stepped up a campaign and to safeguard British interests ahead of a promised referendum on membership in the alliance. Cameron gave a speech in London at the Chatham House, a think tank, where he detailed key demands they intend to make of the EU as the country prepares for an in and or out vote on membership of the group. He has vowed to hold that by the end of 2017. We are a proud independent nation. We intend to stay that way, Cameron, who wants Britain to remain in a reformed EU, told the audience. Never forget the European Union now comprises 28 ancient nations of Europe, he said. That diversity in Europe's greatest strength, Britain says. Let's celebrate the fact. Let's acknowledge that the answer to every problem is not always more Europe. Sometimes it is less Europe. Describing his list of demands of not Mission Impossible, Cameron said he wants the EU to reform the reciprocal access to give member states to welfare benefits, to protect the single market for Britain and others outside, the euro currency, and to write competitiveness into the DNA of the whole European Union. He also wants national parliaments to be given more power to opt out EU rules. The referendum is probably the most important decision the British people will have to take at the ballot box in our lifetime, he said. Crucially, Cameron said that if British voters decided it was time to leave the EU, a second referendum would not be held and the decision would be final. The comments made in the address were echoed in a letter he sent to European Council President Donald Tusk. Margaritis Schemes, a spokesman for the European Commission, the blow's executive arm, and called some of the demands in Cameron's speech highly problematic. They touch upon the fundamental freedoms of our international market, he said. Schemes indicated that restricting welfare benefits for people from the EU nations for 4 years would be tantamount to limiting freedom of movement and one of the founding principles of the EU. He said Cameron's letter to the Commission should be considered the beginning, not the end, of the negotiations. George Osborne, Britain's Treasury Minister, nevertheless said the proposals would be to everyone in the EU's benefit. We're going to sit around the table and the negotiations are going to start, and I think we have a real good chance to achieve the reform that we will want to see, Osborne said. German Chancellor Angela Merkel reported in Berlin that Cameron was bringing no surprises to the table. She said the proposals would Britain's Prime Minister over the phone Monday was willing to work with him on them. Figures published by marketing research firm YouGov in September showed that more Britain, 40%, wanted to leave the EU than remain a member, 38%, for the first time since November 2014. YouGov said it coincided with the biggest European refugee crisis since World War II, but said it could not be sure if that was the cause of the shift. However, another poll by research firm Ipsos Mori, published in late October, revealed that 52% of Britons said they would vote to stay in the EU if there was a referendum, compared with 39% who would vote to leave. The EU released a separate report Tuesday that was critical to Turkey's record of human rights, corruption, and the pace of which it has enacted democratic reforms. Turkey started EU accession negotiation in 2005, but they have been delayed amid European concerns over major shortcomings and legislation that run against European standards. President Obama's weekly address. In this week's address, the President discussed the importance of reducing the number of people without health insurance. Because of the Affordable Care Act, more people now have the security of health insurance than ever before. As the law's coverage provisions have taken effect, 17.6 million Americans have gained coverage, and the nation's uninsured rate now stands at the lowest level ever. The AC is working, making healthcare more affordable, accessible, and of higher quality for millions of people. But there are still Americans around the country who are eligible for marketplace coverage yet retain uninsured. The President encouraged those who do not have health insurance at this point, especially those whose communities are part of the Healthy Communities Challenge, to go online, take advantage of the open enrollment period that began this past weekend, and sign up for health care coverage. Thank you for watching Millennium Headlines. See you next week.